The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Thank you all so much for joining us here on CPA Academy. This is Jason Bookman. I am happy to be your moderator on today's webinar on continuous business continuity with accounts payable automation. We have the one and only Chris Doxey, who's going to be presenting for all of you over the next hour. You're going to be hearing from Anand at WhatToPal a little bit later on. We are so grateful for both of their time today and for all of you in the audience. And before we get going, I just want to check that everything is working for those of you in the audience. So if you don't mind going over to the questions panel in the GoToWebinar control panel, just pop open the questions panel. Let me know that you can see the slides and hear my voice. Feel free to let me know where you're listening in from. I see a lot of people checking in from all over the country, and I'm glad that you're all able to see and hear. Anybody having any technical issues, go ahead and let me know in the questions panel. I'll do the best I can to get the troubleshooting done quickly and put your focus where it needs to be. Onward to some housekeeping about credit now that I know that everyone can see and hear. This is a 1-hour webinar, qualifies for 1 CPE credit. The way you earn that credit is fairly straightforward. Just remain logged in for at least 50 minutes out of the 60 minutes of our allotted time and answer the polling questions. We're going to have 4 polls throughout today's webinar. You only need to answer 3 in order to qualify for full credit. We do, of course, recommend you answer all 4. We here at CPA Academy are going to use those polls and your time logged in to issue credit that will be done by us at CPA Academy by the end of the day today and available in your CPA Academy accounts within 24 hours, along with an archived copy of today's webinar and a copy of the handouts. The handouts are available to download over in the handouts section of the GoToWebinar control panel, as well as in your CPA Academy accounts. So you can access those right now or in the future if you so choose to. We, of course, want to thank WhatToPal for bringing today's webinar to all of you today. You're going to be hearing a little bit from Anand at WhatToPal a little bit later on, and we are extraordinarily grateful for their presence on the platform and for bringing today's webinar to all of you. So now that we've gotten through the housekeeping, I am going to step out of the way and turn today's presentation over to Chris. So Chris, the floor is yours, and let's get started.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for that great introduction. And we're going to take a look at business continuity, or continuous continuity. And our agenda is going to focus on a little introduction to AP automation, what are the benefits, and then we'll define what continuous continuity is. And we'll take a look at what are the risks and where are the risks lurking in your manual AP process. Sounds kind of ominous, but we have a little case study for you along with some other examples. And then we'll get into how specifically AP automation can help you mitigate these risks. And as we know, in today's environment, we know that certainly business continuity and the lack of business continuity is causing a lot of risk. It's adding additional pressure to accounts payable processes and other financial processes, but it's certainly opening the door for fraudsters. And they're taking advantage of today's environment, and we can help you figure out a way to stop them. So if we look at, as we define AP automation, we're in what we would call a black swan event. And a black swan event, of course, with COVID-19 is extremely rare, unpredicted, and unprecedented, and it's dramatically changing our global economy, society, and history. And every day it's just amazing, how many people and how many companies are impacted. However, good news, maybe light at the end of the tunnel, is that a black swan event initially creates significant chaos, which of course we're experiencing, but can be the leading factor for drivers of change for the longer term. So, and why do we worry about business continuity? Well, you know what? Suppliers need to be paid in order to keep going. And if accounts payable can't issue those payments, Well, it's impacting suppliers, it's impacting jobs, it's impacting the economy, as we know. And then by deploying or continuing to strengthen automated business processes such as receivable procurement and payables, you're really helping your company to function as usual. So another important statement that's really good food for thought. All right, so we have 6 myths of AP automation, and the more I look at this slide, I always think of a couple more, and I'm sure you probably can as well. And the first myth is that the implementation are too expensive and they don't fit our business model. And no one will use our solution. And we'll still need to deal with manual AP processes. Well, you know, honestly, with number 4, you might have some manual processes, but the more you automate, the more you're alleviating those manual processes and certainly the risk that goes with them. We're still going to experience fraud, and that could be true to some extent. You're certainly going to lessen the risk and lessen the fraud, as you'll see. However, knowing what I know about fraudsters, they can really figure out how to infiltrate a company and a process, and it can be very creative and use those talents and powers for bad things rather than good things. And the last one is that we're going to lose our jobs. AP jobs will be negatively impacted by automation. Not necessarily so. Actually, more visibility to dashboards and data to analyze spend and provide more robust and meaningful reports to your company. So if we look at the key components of an automation initiative, we talk about AP transformation, and it's basically a philosophy. And it starts with a strategic vision of your future business process. And of course, that's going to be based on understanding where you are today. And I certainly don't believe in automating for the sake of automating, but certainly enhancing current business processes and figuring out what makes sense. Reactive approach to technology adoption. And that's, you know, important to think about. We're not just reacting and implementing technology for technology's sake, but we're really understanding how technology can help our company and continue to focus on our people, our process, and of course the technology, what makes sense and what's going to really create a better environment for accounts payable. If we drill down a little bit, traditionally AP automation refers to that technology that's used to streamline and automate AP processes, which removes manual tasks and provides better visibility and control over important financial data. Think about an accounts payable, how much data and how important that data is, and being able to get to it a lot quicker and certainly have accurate data. If we're looking at an end-to-end process with supplier master invoicing or invoice processing and payment, we're looking at touchless, and we know touchless absolutely supports any social distancing requirements. So just something to think about. And if we think about the key components of the AP process, and I've seen this many, many times over the years, anytime I've done an AP process review, I find that if the information in the supplier master is correct and verified, that we know invoices that are being processed by that supplier are going to be correct. And of course, we're dependent on that correctly. And what we're looking for, if supplier master and invoice process line up, we know payment is going to be a lot more accurate. We're going to be avoiding payments to wrong suppliers, erroneous payments, and also one of the big fears in accounts payable is a duplicate payment. So we think about, well, how can we automate those three to get to a truly touchless process? And those, of course, need to be supported by my general corporate controls, which I've presented on actually quite a few times. That includes looking at segregation of duties, system access, and delegation of authority. And basically what we want to do in a nutshell is make sure the same individual can't set up a supplier, pay that supplier, and cover their tracks with a journal entry, or an individual can't approve a phony invoice for a large dollar amount without, certainly the correct authority. And we know that accounts payable is definitely the foundation of the procure to pay process. And we absolutely need procurement and receiving to do their thing and help us get that three-way match control in place. Two-way match, of course, for an evaluated receipt settlement process. And here's where we're looking at ensuring with internal controls compliance and certainly integrated ERP systems and again, automation, that we get a lot closer to improved cost controls, compliance, and achieve the 10 benefits of AP automation. Payment accuracy, the ability to take early payment discounts. And I once worked with a client and they said, well, yeah, we'd love to take early payment discounts, but we don't know which suppliers are offering that. And I said, well, you kind of look at the invoice and the contracts and make sure you're taking advantage of them. And that's really hard to get to with a 100% manual process. With automation, we're helping the validity of our internal controls. We're reducing spend data, and that can be certainly a driver of cash forecasting, cash management, and accurate budgets and forecasts. And we're looking at a more timely and accurate close, because guess what? If we have electronic invoicing with AP automation, we are not having to do as many accruals, and we know that the invoices that are processed when we do our financial close cutoff are going to be all captured for that monthly close. We're stating liabilities accurately, and as mentioned, we have accurate cash forecasting and management. And there's new efficiencies, so it's not just about changing process. And I've seen many AP organizations that have gone through automation really look at accounts payable or put accounts payable processes in a state where they're looking at a value added department. We're improving customer service and supplier relationships, because with automation, we're paying on time. We're not losing invoices if we've got automated workflow, and we're building in business continuity. Said, well, you know what, with our manual invoice process, we actually have to go in the office and pick those invoices up and process them at home. And very, very, again, amazing that many companies have to do that. All right, so we have our first polling question. We do have 4 throughout the presentation. And, again, maybe to see if you were paying attention, but we're wondering how you think or why you think those answers are coming in quickly. Thanks for your prompt responses. We're almost at 90%.
Just going to jump in for a second to say, if you are in the audience and you're having trouble answering the poll question, we recommend you hit the escape button on your computer to exit out of full screen mode, and use your mouse to stretch the webinar window to the point that you're able to answer the poll by selecting your response and hitting submit. And please make sure you do hit submit. We're going to get 2 and 1.
Okay, so the clear winner is all of the above. That's about 90% that answered that letter D. And obviously, if we automate AP, we're not totally reducing or alleviating, but we're avoiding duplicate payments. we're improving cost controls and compliance, and we're reducing risk, and we're establishing business continuity. So I love that everybody was you were paying attention, at least to the last couple of slides. So thank you for that. All right, what is continuous continuity? And we're going to talk a bit about business continuity plans. And having worked in payroll and logistics and corporate consolidation, as certainly in procurement and P2P areas, one of the first things we did was make sure we had have gotten a lot easier, but sometimes we need to take a look at what would happen if we weren't allowed to come in the office. We weren't allowed to spend any time to do our jobs. What if the world totally changed? And sometimes we might have a business continuity plan, but it's outdated because we haven't kept up to date with technology changes, and we still think everything needs to be done on premise. And what an outdated plan it does is it really jeopardizes your ability to continue as a viable entity. Black Swan event that we're in now, the following risks are created due to a lack of a plan. There's a severe disruption, and I've worked with quite a few clients that have said, well, we can't do anything because we're because of COVID-19, and we're either not going to be issuing payments to suppliers until things settle down because everything is manual. And critical financial systems may not be recovered first, and the company could for regulatory fines. And we wonder, we're seeing quite a few small, large, medium business entities really suffer and file for bankruptcy. And it's going to be interesting to see if there's any case studies done on the root cause of what happened. And obviously, too much focus on revenue and not enough focus on managing processes and cash. So there's no cash flow to keep the companies going. People have been laid off. Again, doors have been shuttered. It's absolutely amazing. Yeah, and it's not all due to, well, gee, they didn't have a business continuity plan, but thinking about what are the key financial processes, and accounts payable is certainly one of them, and what could have because you're hoping your suppliers will stay in business as well. But this is continuity versus disaster recovery. The continuity piece is a strategy, and a business continuity plan, or BCP, can ensure the continuity of operations with minimal disruption and confusion, and we'll add chaos to that sentence as well. Many companies just have a disaster recovery plan. If there was, a tornado or a blizzard or a flood, they know how to recover. And it needs to take care of those primary business functions like information systems and certainly applications and corporate support functions, post-disaster or emergency situation. Like in the days of, certainly Katrina, we've had enough of these Black Swan events that we could list them all. But the difference is business continuity requires you to keep operations functioning during and immediately after the event. And disaster recovery focuses on how you respond after the event has completed and how you return to normal. So in a way, you need an aspect of disaster recovery, but certainly a good solid business continuity plan that's tested and proven and updated will get you there a lot closer. Okay, so where do you focus? Did a little bit of research for you, and Ernst & Young recommends the following points to help focus on business continuity during these difficult times and really any time. You prioritize the individual's safety and continuous engagement. And, again, with my example of the accounts payable manager going to pick up invoices and then, making sure they're paid, and certainly working from home, it's safe to go in the office. Well, it's certainly getting a lot better, but certainly it's a risk. Reshape your strategy for business continuity. Where do you focus first? And communicate with relevant stakeholders, government and regulators, and build resilience. And I think we're seeing this happen in a lot of areas, but build resilience in preparation for the new normal. We know things aren't going to get back to where they were back, say, 6 months ago, but we need to think about how do we function in the new normal. So those are 4 points that Ernst & Young recommends. And if we take it a step further and define continuous continuity, and we really need to make sure that AP management knows the total effort is needed to develop and maintain an effective plan in terms of specific business processes like AP. And to take it a step further, you actually break AP down into all those functions like supplier master. And looking at the chart we just saw a few slides back, who's going to handle supplier master? Do you have any systems that are still in your company that you don't have access to because you haven't automated? So it's a checklist. It's defining your continuity efforts for accounts payable by process, and look at the people side of it, make sure you've got the people available to handle the efforts. Document the impact of an extended loss of operations and how that's actually what that means to key business functions. And we talked about a manual process, but what are the additional risks? How will suppliers be invoices and checks? And develop a plan that's easy to develop and maintain. You don't want it to be that complicated. And look at integrating business continuity issues into ongoing business planning and development to ensure your plan is viable over time. Because as we know, things are going to change. We don't have crystal balls. I wish we did, but we don't. So we have to figure out, okay, put a stake in the ground for business continuity planning, but we know things will things will change. And to include it in your internal controls programs so that you can take a look at it, certainly on an annual basis to make sure it's updated. All right, so where are the risks lurking in your AP process? And we're going to go through a bunch of red flags with some other examples. And we'll take a look at general AP red flags. Now, we're not really focusing on fraud here, but we're just letting you know that these are things we need to be aware of that fraudsters know about. And if we're one step ahead of them during this pandemic, we're going to be in a lot better shape. And a lot of this is internal, because as we know, there's internal, external. Too much of an item or inappropriate items. Somebody's accepting low quality or non-compliant goods or services. Invoice goods or services can't be located in inventory or accounted for. No receiving report for invoice goods or services. Questionable or no purchase order for goods or services. And there are some disparities between contract terms, purchase orders, receiving records, and inventory or usage records. Major discrepancies between invoice and supporting documents. Total payments to supplier exceed total purchase order or contract amounts, and collusion. Now, I'll tell you, collusion is a hard one to get, but sometimes it does involve investigation along with data. Other red flags, duplicate invoices. Now again, with a manual process, how are you going to find duplicate payments or duplicate invoices? These could be in the same or similar amount to the same or related supplier, for the same or similar goods or services, for the same description of goods or services, the same amount, invoice number and PO number. And there's several other types, but these are the major ones. And then my segregation of duties example is the same employee can set up a supplier, order, receive, and approve payment for goods or services and cover their tracks from an accounting perspective, possibly with a phony journal entry. Delegation of authority, and sometimes we hear about rogue spending, and this is an issue to pay attention to. Having the additional signatures, so there's maybe some rogue or out of purchase or split purchases going on, and they might not even be able to get to who the proper approver should be. So that's what really rogue or splitting purchase orders or purchases is going to do without good delegation of authority controls. Supplier fraud, phony suppliers, bank account changes. We've got a little case study that talks about that. Billing schemes, supplier kickbacks and collusion. Employees posing as suppliers. Using a UPS store as a mailbox, as an address, that could be a red flag right there. Payment fraud, ACH fraud, check fraud, embezzlement. So those are the examples of cash leakage that you might be familiar with, but all right, the impact of COVID-19 on AP cash leakage and fraud. Phony changes to bank accounts. Well, we were in a tough times, and a supplier could change a bank account, but it's not really the supplier. It could be an employee that's changing that bank account. Phishing or business email compromise. And there's an increase in successful phishing activity, and we're seeing more aiming to conduct business email account compromise scams. And we can see that by this case study. Now, this isn't what happened during COVID-19. It's happened quite a while back, but this actually gives you a very, very good example of some of the things that can happen with not the right controls, with people not paying attention, and with suppliers or individuals getting greedy, or, again, looking at the fraud triangle, they're justifying the fraud because they need the money. So again, an older case, but very apropos. Could one, and this is what exactly happened to the multi-billion-dollar company Condé Nast, and the parent company is Advanced Publications. A regular supplier, supposedly Quad Graphics, sent an email to the AP department at Condé Nast, letting them know they had switched bank accounts. The email looked legitimate and didn't raise any red flags. And here's the problem. The email wasn't from Quad Graphics at all, but from a con man named Andy Surface. Mr. Surface had established a company with a very similar name to the supplier and sent the email himself. So even the supplier name wasn't specifically Quad Graphics, but it was close enough. To the account Mr. Surface controlled before Condé Nast, when the real supplier contacted the AP department looking for past due payments. Well, they weren't, the legit supplier wasn't paid, so they contacted AP saying, okay, where's my payment? And they found all this out. So this is what can happen, and even the best of times, and think what suppliers or phony suppliers are doing in the worst of times. Is to make you aware that true story here, and we can actually prevent this from happening with proper automation and controls. All right, we have our next polling question. And the question is, what's the most tedious aspect of your accounts payable process? And we've got 5 choices.
Go ahead and get your answers in. Again, if you're having trouble answering, hit the escape button on your keyboard, exit out of full screen mode, and use your mouse to stretch the webinar window to the point where you can answer, and hit the submit button. And please make sure you do hit submit. We're going to leave this poll open for long enough to get a majority of responses in. And this is poll 2. We're going to have 2 more polls after this one.
Okay, I think we're at 94%.
Yep, we're going to go ahead and close this out in 3, 2, and 1.
Okay, perfect. So it looks like the winner is matching invoice to corresponding purchase orders. That was 36%. The next one is invoice coding at 28%. Getting invoices approved is 16%. And 11% is getting payments approved, and 10% setting up a payment run. Now, you've identified these tedious components of AP, and think about what automation would do for you. You'd alleviate coding, you'd alleviate getting invoices approved if you put in approval workflow, and with e-invoicing or electronic invoicing, you're able to match invoices to corresponding purchase orders seamlessly. And of course, the payment process can be automated as well. So thank you for answering those questions. And as we drill down a little bit, we're going to talk about how can AP automation mitigate these risks. And you've identified what keeps you up at night a bit for those tedious components. And if we look at the benefits of AP automation, we're just going to look at 10 alternatives for automation, and we'll get into how each one can help alleviate risk. But think about how these solutions can get you to improved AP cost controls and compliance, and certainly continuity. And the 10 we're going to talk about are supplier portals, e-procurement, e-invoicing, PO to invoice conversion, document management, invoice scan, data capture, automated matching, automated workflow approvals, e-payment, system access tools. All right, so how does AP automation reduce risk? With a supplier portal, there's really a couple ways to look at this. Suppliers can actually get a status of their invoices to see where it is in the payment process. But what I call an intelligent supplier portal is suppliers can be automatically validated before they're entered into the supplier master file. And any of those scam and at-risk suppliers can be spotted with validation rules. So what we're avoiding are those scam suppliers, and certainly the risk of an employee attempting to act as a supplier, which I actually found at a client. The individual was actually, in the olden days of faxing invoices, which we really don't do so much anymore, right from an internal fax number in the company. So the first thing the AP manager wanted to do is run down the hall and see who was faxing from that number. And the advice we give whenever you suspect a fraud, to involve internal audit or security or anyone that does those sorts of investigations. With e-procurement, we're creating requisitions and purchase orders electronically, and we're alleviating and removing the risk of errors made in a manual data process. So think about with automation, we're taking away those hands-on keyboards and putting in data that could be wrong, it could be transposed, or it could be intentionally diverted. With e-invoicing, we're reducing the risk of processing a duplicate invoice, paying an incorrect amount, or exposure. And since we know invoices are going to be paid more accurately in a timely manner, and supports cash forecasting, it can actually help reduce fraud. PO to invoice conversion eliminates the risk of processing a duplicate invoice, and it also reduces the risk of fraud and builds in segregation of duties controls that we talked about. Can actually help speed up the approval time and can improve working capital, and this helps support opportunities for early payment discounts. Can be shared with a supplier as part of the automation solution. And that's going to alleviate any need for suppliers to find out where the invoice is in the payment cycle. Many companies are using invoice scan and data capture, and this is really done by, usually done by a third party, because they are looking at the invoices, scanning them into a file, and then there's an upload to your ERP system. And what the third party is usually doing is they've got controls built in to find duplicate suppliers or duplicate invoices, and they would be flagged and brought to the attention of the client to make sure that those invoices aren't erroneously paid. All right, so we have our next polling question. We've got 2 more to go. This is number 3. And our polling question is open. And the question is, what's the biggest impact of AP automation?
I'll leave this open for long enough to get a majority of responses in. So go ahead and get your answers in. To poll question number 3, we're going to leave this open for just a little bit longer while you all render your responses. There's going to be one more poll after this. All right, we're pretty close to getting a majority of responses in. Again, this is poll number 2. So we're going to leave this open for about another 5 seconds. So go ahead and get your votes in. Or excuse me, this is poll 3. I'm going to close this down in 4, 3, 2, and 1.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So the winner here is 44% improved productivity. Next is 36% reduced risk, 16% reduced invoice processing costs, and 5% early payment discounts. Yep, so thank you very much for that. And those are certainly very, very good answers. We see improved productivity as one of the outcomes, but certainly reduced cost as well. All right, continuing on with our 10 solutions that we had on our list. If we look at automated matching, and I think one of the questions was what's the most tedious process? And trying to match your PO, your receipt, and your invoice manually is rough. Even with systems that do a lot of this, ERP systems, there's still a need for human intervention. Sometimes an invoice has to go into a blocked or hold phase until all the matching can occur. Sometimes there's a lot of questions back and forth to procurement to make sure that the correct PO is being referenced. And what we're really doing here is that we're reducing risk, of course, but improving the invoice cycle time process, reducing processing costs, and we have new data accuracy. And you would actually set those user-defined matching rules. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. It's something that can be established by the user or the client. Number 7, automated workflow approvals. This is, again, I love all these solutions, but I look at how much that time this one saves, like e-invoicing, and you're really getting to that touchless process. And what I love about automated workflows approvals, you're automating your delegation of authority, policy, and tables. And your workflow can be directly linked to an employee master file where approval levels are automated, updated, and it's really based upon job levels or titles. So you don't have to worry about any manual intervention for your DOA process. However, what the driver of your delegation of authority process is a table and certainly a policy that references these tables. And what you can build in link directly to the table and route the approval to the next level up. Now, a lot of people want to avoid that because they want to go under the radar screen, and they think if a controller or a vice president needs to approve the PO or the invoice, then it's going to just raise a red flag. They're going to get a bunch of questions, and maybe they're trying to hide a collusion activity or some sort of fraud. But this is really a very good control, and it certainly can be used not only in accounts payable, but other processes in your company that require approvals. With e-payment, and what we're looking here to do is alleviate checks. And we have a class where we ask, well, how many manual checks are you doing? And we get various answers. And the dilemma here is, should we have checks for emergency payments, or should we look at moving all suppliers reconciliation with cash accounting? It shouldn't be AP, it should be a different department for segregation of duties, but looking at those reconciliation and also the escheatment process or unclaimed property that goes with a check payment process. So we look at ACH, we look at certainly wires, and the more suppliers we move with P cards, the advantage is that you can make certainly a deferred payment, but get significant rebates back for using a P card. Does mean you need to have some sort of P card administration process, but certainly what's the benefit versus the risk. All right, the last two we're going to take a look at from our list: system access verification. System access verification is a great tool because you can actually build in controls around extra and intra SOD controls, and you can catch somebody that shouldn't have the system access that they do inside your department. So that could be inside AP, that's an intra conflict, or you could have somebody outside your department. So maybe somebody in AR is trying to process an accounts payable transaction, and you want to make sure that those are flagged with reporting tools, and in some cases even sending an alert to the business process owner that there could be some shenanigans going on. The last one is also one of my favorites. Self-audit tools can be included in your internal controls program or your client's internal controls program. And self-assessments, as well as continuous auditing initiatives. And what these tools basically do is they have payment data, and there's algorithms that are in place and using fuzzy logic, and they look at the duplicate payments using some of the classifications we already talked about. And you can use these tools in two ways. Actually, in a real-time environment, review all your payments before your payment during payments. And the other way you can use these self-audit tools is to audit your accounts payable process, certainly quarterly, and embed that tool right into your internal controls program. So you can see there are lots of alternatives out there to help support your environment and certainly provide business continuity. And the challenge that we all face is companies can't anticipate every possible solution. And, you know, again, anyone that's done any sort of risk analysis, there's all kinds of models, there's all sorts of what if models that you can use to figure out what could possibly happen. And having a good, solid business continuity plan that anticipates risk is certainly going to help protect your assets and data. And, you know, again, you can't drive yourself crazy thinking about every possible risk. But going forward, companies really need to always ask what can go wrong and will I be prepared for the next Black Swan event? And we have our last polling question for you. And I will hand this over to my colleague at Tipalti when we're done with this poll.
All right, and of course we've got poll 3 up right now, or poll 4, sorry. We have poll 4, the fourth and final poll question for this webinar. And we're going to turn it over to Anand from Tipalti. And right now we have this fourth and final poll open. So everyone go ahead and get your answers in. We're going to leave this open for about another 30 seconds while you get your responses in. We are pretty close to the end of this poll. Again, a reminder, if you're having trouble answering the poll question, hit the escape button on your computer keyboard, exit out of full screen mode and enter into windowed mode. Use your mouse to stretch the webinar window to the point where you're able to answer the poll and hit the submit button. With that, we're going to get ready to close this poll down in 3, 2, and 1.
Okay. Thank you very much. The question was, do you plan to introduce automation to your AP process? And 39% no plans. And I love this answer. 32% already have. Congratulations. 14% within 1 year, 9% within 2 years, and 6% within 3 years or more. So it's good to see that we've got about a third of our audience that's already automated. So congratulations, and hopefully you were in good shape during this pandemic. All right, I'm going to pass it over to Tipalti. Anand, you ready to go?
Sure. Thank you, Chris. That was an excellent presentation. A lot of great information, basically from the that you provided, and for the audience to take in, hopefully. And they've taken some notes, but this presentation is going to be available to everybody to download as well. So my name is Anand Misra, and I'm the Director of Product and Partner Marketing here at Tipalti. And if you move on to the next slide, I will just show you, give you a quick overview about Tipalti. Next slide, please.
Yep.
Great. So a quick overview about Tipalti. So we are a global payables solution that enables businesses and finance departments to automate and scale their accounts payable effortlessly as their businesses grow and become more global. So our mission is basically very simple. It's to liberate the finance team so that they can focus on more strategic and value-added tasks. So this is the Tipalti wheel that you see on your screen, which highlights our philosophy that if you put a robust system in place now, you will not outgrow it as you scale. So we provide an end-to-end solution to manage the entire payables operation. So it starts with supplier management from the top that you see on your screen, with self-service onboarding, which includes over 26,000 built-in rules and validation to ensure that the payment data is accurate. You can white label the supplier portal so that your brand is up and center in front of your payees. We have a KPMG approved tax compliance engine that identifies and collects the correct tax forms, such as W-9s and W-8s, and also generates 1099s and 1042S tax prep reports, while also calculating any necessary year-end withholdings as well. The solution includes invoice processing with OCR technology and machine learning to ensure, as Chris was telling you, touchless or straight-through invoice processing, along with advanced approvals that are built into the system. And we heard from Chris basically the importance of approvals, with approving the invoices. We also have 2- and 3-way PO matching for PO-backed invoices. We are also a licensed money transmitter and pay across 199 countries in 120 currencies with 6 different payment methods. We do sanction screening to ensure that you don't pay anyone who's on a terrorist watch list somewhere or who's listed as a money launderer. We have robust reporting with more than 20 out-of-the-box reports and real-time multi-entity payment reconciliation with ERP and accounting systems, which basically ensures faster financial flows. So NetNow is our built-in early payment solution. So you can generate revenue by paying suppliers earlier without adding to your workload or impacting your working capital. And it's built into your system that you can offer your suppliers. The one last capability that I want to highlight is basically the one that you see on the service foundations below is our multi-FX or intercompany bank transfer capability. So you can save time and money on foreign exchange or FX conversions. And this is ideal for companies with multiple entities who are paying in different currencies globally. So essentially what Tipalti does is it converts the currency that it's funded into subsidiary currencies and processes these payouts. And the reason why we are able to save you time and get you a better rate for that is because we have $10 billion worth of transactions or payments that flow through the system on an annual basis. And because we can leverage this volume to get you better negotiations with. This is built on the Tipalti platform, which basically ensures that proper financial controls or compliance are in place. Next slide, please. Great. So I will also highlight some of our key differentiators that are there. So the first differentiator is scalability. So scalability is essentially doing more with less. So if you look at the traditional growth, it's generally riddled with problems such as adding resources, systems, processes, etc. Right? So instead, it's much more productive by all the increasing costs that come along with adding resources, systems, and processes. And with Tipalti, companies can scale payables rapidly and efficiently without adding staff and systems to ensure global growth. So how do you do that? So as an example, we have cross-border payments in 120 currencies in 190 countries and 6 different payment methods that I talked about in the earlier slide. And we also provide robust multi-entity capabilities to enable you to manage multiple subsidiaries in a single instance with consolidated headquarter views. So that's great for a corporate controller who's got multiple subsidiaries, whether he or she is looking at it and wants to get a consolidated view for all this within a single instance of the system. So that actually is huge if you're expanding and if you've got multiple entities or subsidiaries globally. We also help you, like I stated earlier, with our multi-FX or intercompany bank transfers to convert currency to pay global suppliers. The second key differentiator is efficiency. It's all about improving productivity of the finance function by automating the activities and avoid future headcount, which is one of our key value propositions. We all know that AP is the #1 most time-consuming and manual function in finance. And with Tipalti, companies can eliminate 80% of the workload managing payables. How do we do that? As I showed you in the earlier slide, at the wheel, we provide an end-to-end solution that automates all your payable operations, starting with vendor or supplier management, including self-service onboarding, the data and payment validation, the rules that are built in to ensure that you have proper data in place, and the tax form collection, including the W-9s and W-8s, and doing the TIN validation. We provide OCR-based invoice processing and machine learning, advanced approvals that I talked about, the 2- and 3-way PO matching that we do. So the whole 9 yards, including basically the payment reconciliation and reporting within a single system, the early payments that Chris was talking about, it's built into the system. And lastly, but certainly not the least, is the ERP integration. So all these processes in a single system basically help eliminate 80% of your payables workload. The third differentiator is financial controls. So one of the key challenges of any growing organization, especially CFOs, the key responsibility is to ensure that financial controls and compliance, everything is in place. And they have to be confident that their AP and go global. So we have multi-user role-based security, audit logs. We ensure secure payment information collection. the tax compliance that I just talked about, and the verification prior to onboarding. We ensure that you don't pay anybody who's on a terrorist watch list with OFAC, SDN, and other sanction screening that we do. And we are SOC and GDPR compliant and have multi-factor authentication and IP restrictions for application access. All these help CFOs sleep better at night, knowing that all the security controls and compliance financial flows. So we streamline multi-entity payment reconciliation to accelerate financial flows by 25% or more in many cases. And we have customer use case and studies to prove it. We integrate with ERP systems such as Oracle NetSuite, Sage Intacct, QuickBooks Online in real time to ensure that the time-consuming efforts of exporting bank data to spreadsheets and then re-importing it to ERP is basically eliminated. So that's about us and your value proposition. And that's a little bit about Tipalti. Please feel free to reach out to us if you have.
Okay, thank you very, very much for that great information. Yeah, so we have a question for you. Does the global remittance process include the ability to handle Bitcoin calcs and transactions?
No, so we don't do Bitcoins, Chris, at the moment. We don't intend to because we are a licensed money transmitter. We are regulated by the U.S. Treasury. And since they don't permit it, we don't do Bitcoins.
Okay, yep, good. So I actually had another couple questions come in, and I'll combine these questions into one answer. We're talking about how do I sell my automation solution to my senior management? And then once you do that, how do you actually evaluate a solution provider? So the first part of the question is really making your business case to your finance executive, if you report to the controller or the CFO, and how automation can actually cover all the things we talked about and how it's going to impact the company at the corporate level, and put together, again, a good business case and have the details ready. But certainly a senior person would maybe want to see the highlights. And again, have your business case. I do have a template that can provide if anyone is interested. And the second part of the question is, how do you do the evaluation of a solution provider? Yeah, and that's a really, really good question. And the two parts of it go hand in hand. The evaluation process includes the qualitative aspect, which is certainly doing an ROI. And the second part of it is what's the qualitative aspect? What are you going to have for certainly accuracy? It's hard to put a cost around improved controls, data accuracy, and of course compliance. Could be some cost avoidance information you can put in there. But basically do an ROI, which means having a good handle on your costs today, what's your cost per invoice going to be, and how much is the total investment going to actually cost you, and what do you anticipate the cost savings to be. So very interesting to put all the pieces together. And as we talk about any sort of AP automation, we're breaking down silos. We're looking at getting to basically state our business case. And I'm going to take a peek and see if there's any more questions. I did get a question in that I answered, whether COVID-19 was a black swan event. And yes, it most certainly is. And there's a lot of very good articles about, certainly the impact and how it's considered a black swan event, and the other types of black swan events that we've seen over our lifetimes. And certainly there's interesting stories about other ones that have been in place. Yep. So the approving invoice items and discrepancies verbally. And my question was, really think about audit trails and protecting yourself if you're in accounts payable. Make sure you get something in an email and certainly in writing to protect your process and certainly your company. All right, so those are all the key questions that have come in. Aman, did you want to add anything else?
Just a quick point from my side, Chris. So that's a great response, basically. So in terms of how do you sell to your executive or senior management, and we kind of get these questions on a regular basis from companies that are looking to evaluate. So generally, you hear phrases like everything already runs smoothly, we are not just big enough, we don't have the budget. All these are common objections, basically, to automating an AP. And like you said, one of the main ways of overcoming the stakeholders' objections is by developing a winning business case, right? And it starts with understanding your AP automations or AP department's top goals. And that kind of leads to the next step, right? So identifying those objections and effectively responding to them will basically help you demonstrate the credibility of the solution and reduce the fear of potential risks that the stakeholders might have. So if, in short, since we are running out of time, so the three things that you need to do, basically, first, develop a business case, and second, get calculators, and you talked about the checklists, etc. And third, get some use case and testimonials that you have to show that, hey, the system really works. It's not just the vendor who's talking about it based on your industry, based on your processes, etc.
Okay, great.
All right, and with that, we are just about out of time, so okay to wrap up?
Yes.
All right, so thank you, of course, Anand and Chris, for presenting today. Thanks again to Tapalti for bringing today's webinar to all of you in the audience, and thanks, of course, to all of you in the audience. We're going to wrap up quick. We're going to process CPE by the end of the day today. That will be available from our team here at CPA Academy within 24 to 48 hours, along with an archived copy of today's webinar and a copy of the handouts. Thank you all again for your time and attendance. We hope to see you all on future webinars and hope you all have a fantastic rest of the day.